What is an API? Hey everyone, I'm Lauren, a tech intern, and when I first heard of APIs, I was honestly a bit confused. I actually didn't know if you said API or API or something. I know it was embarrassing. Let's try to break down the basics of an API so you don't go through the same thing. An API is a group of logic that takes a specific input and gives you a specific output. A few examples. If you give the Google Maps API an address as an input, it gives you back that address's latitude and longitude coordinates as an output. If you give the JavaScript array.sort, say it like array.sort API, a group of numbers as an input, it sorts those numbers as an output. If you give the Lyft driver API a start and finish address as an input, it finds the best driver as an output. When engineers build modules of code to do specific things, they clearly define what inputs those modules take and what outputs they produce. That's all an API really is. When you give an API a bunch of inputs to get the outputs you want, it's called calling the API. Like calling your grandma. What's up, Nana? An API will usually tell you exactly what kind of input it takes. If you tried putting your name into the Google Maps API as an input, it wouldn't work very well. It's designed to do a very specific task. Just like with inputs, APIs give you really specific outputs. Assuming you give the Google Maps API the right input, like an address, it will always give you back the coordinates in the same exact format. If the API can't find coordinates for the address you put in, it will tell you exactly why. To better understand how APIs fit into the tech ecosystem, you need to know that most apps you use are built on the concept of having a front end and back end. Let's start with the back end. Companies start by building APIs for all the important things that users are going to need to do in their app. For Gmail, Google started with APIs that receive, show, send, and forward emails, but those are all called through code. These APIs and the logic for when they get used and how is the application's backend. It's like what's going on under the car hood. All of those backend APIs are only usable through code, which isn't really something you want to deal with to check email on your iPhone. That's why companies build front ends for their apps, graphical user interfaces that make apps pretty and usable without having to write code. Think of Gmail. Your inbox shows rows of emails and subject lines. The front end is taking that back-end email data and formatting it nicely. You can click on the star icon to flag an email. On the back end, that's triggering a Mark Email as Flagged API. Most interactions on the front end get translated into an API call on the back end, and that's Application Software 101. Once I started to understand this model, it was easier to understand how developers actually use APIs in conversation. In practice, I found that people use API in 3 different contexts, and they all mean different things. Let's start off with internal APIs. When companies build their applications, they design them as a group of interacting APIs. The easiest example to understand is Lyft. There are a few things you might want to do in the Lyft app, and they all trigger different APIs behind the scenes. Actions that you take in the app will trigger internal company APIs that actually do the work to get your request fulfilled. Internal company APIs are also layered. Even though there's probably a broad book a ride API, there are a bunch of smaller APIs under that hood that get it done. Find a driver, book the driver, verify credit card, communicate with users. Those are all individual APIs within the company. None of those Lyft APIs are publicly available. They're just the way that Lyft actually provides their service to you on the back end. But sometimes, companies will make a few of their APIs available and give you instructions on how to use them. A great example is the Twitter API. Normally, you'd use the Twitter app, which makes a bunch of API calls to internal Twitter APIs like show feed, send reply, and search. This is what we just spoke about, front end and back end. But you can also call those APIs yourself, with code, outside of the Twitter app. Usually, when you want an app that is connected with Twitter, you need to create a developer account. Twitter would then review your intentions, make you sign some agreements. Then you are using their API to get data instead of doing something from scratch. The first 2 types of APIs that we just looked at are functional. They usually accomplish something that's practical and easy to understand, like giving you coordinates or booking a ride. But developers also use API to refer to much lower level inputs and outputs, like functions in code. A good example is JavaScript's array.sort method. It's an API that takes a list of numbers or letters as an input and then sorts them and gives them back to you as an output. There are also other APIs related to arrays, like for adding, array.push, and removing things, array.pop, filtering, array.filter, and getting an array's size, array.length. Look, we just scratched the surface. Just know APIs are a way for technologies to communicate and transfer data from one area to another. Some APIs are private, some are public, and some are part of the programming language to allow for easier development. Let us know if you have any questions in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Tech out.